a decapitation strike in Tehran, a collapsed 45-day ceasefire, and 23 civilian casualties entirely erased from the Western news cycle. In the past 24 hours, the media has packaged these events as a surgical counterterrorism victory. But in the theater of asymmetric warfare, there are no isolated incidents. Let us look at the raw, verified data. April 6, 2026. The IRGC officially confirms the death of Major General Majid Khademi, director of the IRGC intelligence organization. Almost instantly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims the kill on X. Listen to his exact words. He posted, "Another central arm of the Iranian terror regime has been severed. Tonight we eliminated Majid Khademi." Eliminated. That is the word they want you to focus on. Now look at what they redacted. Raw data from the Baharistan district of Tehran logs 23 collateral deaths from the blast radius. 6 of them were children. 6. You will not find those data points in a Pentagon press briefing. The refusal to publish collateral damage metrics is a classic intelligence cover-up designed to sanitize kinetic action for domestic consumption. But the body count is only the secondary operation. The primary operation was the timeline. This strike was executed at the exact moment Washington and Tehran were receiving a 45-day ceasefire proposal. A backdoor channel, brokered by Pakistan, specifically engineered to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Not a pause, not a rumor. This was a viable diplomatic off-ramp. By putting ordnance on that target right now, the coalition did not just execute a military maneuver, they executed a deliberate sabotage of the peace process. The objective was to violently slam the door on diplomacy. That is the strategic backdrop, which brings us to the kinetic reality on the ground, the hardware. To understand the desperation of this strike, you must look at the hardware. The operation was classified as a decapitation strike, but pay close attention to what the coalition did not do. They did not engage the Iranian naval units currently choking off the Strait of Hormuz. They did not target the active missile batteries locking down the trade routes. They bypassed the actual front line entirely. They went for a rear echelon target deep inside Tehran. The asset deployed was the F-35I Adir. Let us run the tactical data. The F-35I is a 5th-generation stealth platform. The estimated unit cost sits north of $80 million. For this operation, the aircraft had to penetrate Tehran's integrated air defense system completely undetected. The payload consisted of precision-guided bunker busters. These are heavy penetration munitions equipped with delayed action fuses. The mechanics are kinetic and precise. The bomb uses its terminal velocity to punch through multiple layers of reinforced steel and concrete. It does not explode on impact, it waits. It breaches the fortified intelligence bunker, and only then does the fuse trigger the main explosive charge. $80 million stealth fighters, millions in aerial refueling and logistical support, highly specialized penetrating ordnance. All of this expenditure, all of this risk, deployed to eliminate exactly one man. One man. Calculate the economic mathematics of that decision. This is where the kinetic reality shatters the media narrative. When an advanced military alliance utilizes a $100 million aviation network just to assassinate a single director in his office, you are not witnessing a display of overwhelming dominance. You are looking at a glaring admission of tactical impotence. Why use a stealth sledgehammer to kill a single intelligence officer? Because the coalition cannot touch the actual threat. Right now, the IRGC operates thousands of decentralized underground silos across the coastline. They command swarms of Qadir anti-ship cruise missiles. They are using cheap $20,000 suicide drones to paralyze multi-billion-dollar maritime shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf. Western intelligence agencies know they cannot dismantle that macro structure. The anti-access and area denial grid is too vast. It is heavily fortified, and it is completely decentralized. So they ignore the cheap drones choking off the global economy. Instead, they fly a stealth jet into the capital to drop a bunker buster on a general's desk. They treat a symptom because they are surgically incapable of removing the disease. They trade a multi-million-dollar kinetic strike for a temporary media headline. But the physics of asymmetric warfare do not care about headlines. You do not break a naval blockade by changing the management in an intelligence office. That is the kinetic reality on the ground, which brings us to the ideological delusion driving this entire conflict, the battlefield paradox. The Washington and Tel Aviv security apparatus operates on a fundamentally flawed psychological assumption. They believe implicitly in the decapitation doctrine. The theory sold to the public is simple. Cut off the head of the snake, and the body dies. They claim that eliminating top-tier leadership will crush the adversary's operational will, disrupt the chain of command, and deliver a decisive, clean victory without the messy realities of a ground invasion. But history, specifically the history of asymmetric warfare in the Middle East, violently contradicts this doctrine. Let us look at the actual battlefield paradox. The man they just eliminated, Major General Majid Khademi, was not an irreplaceable anomaly holding the entire Iranian intelligence apparatus together. He was a bureaucratic successor. He stepped into that role for one reason. His predecessor was also targeted and eliminated. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is not a personality cult reliant on a single mastermind. It is a highly compartmentalized, deeply entrenched military-industrial organism. When you deploy an $80 million stealth fighter to assassinate a visible leader in this type of matrix, you do not destroy the network. You simply trigger an automated succession protocol. You remove a known variable. You kill a commander whose habits, communication signals, and operational strategies have been mapped by Western intelligence for years. In his place, the system instantly promotes a subordinate, a younger, more radical, and heavily insulated operative who has learned from the fatal mistakes of his predecessor. The new head of the snake operates entirely in the dark. Look back at the empirical data. January 2020, the drone strike on Major General Qasem Soleimani. The Pentagon and the defense syndicates promised the global public that his death would paralyze Iranian power projection. Did it? No. It triggered a massive ballistic missile barrage on the Al-Assad airbase, leaving over 100 American servicemen with traumatic brain injuries. Injuries the administration initially tried to dismiss as mere headaches. More importantly, the assassination accelerated Tehran's asymmetric warfare program. It catalyzed the mass production of the exact same suicide drone swarms that are currently paralyzing global maritime shipping today. The decapitation doctrine does not neutralize the threat. It mutates it. It breeds a more hostile, less predictable adversary. But the sheer tactical failure of these assassinations is only a fraction of the problem. The true crisis, the one terrifying the global diplomatic corps, is the complete collapse of international red lines. To understand just how far Western military doctrine has devolved, you have to look at the geopolitical contrast. Let us rewind the timeline to exactly 3 days before the strike on Khademi, April 3, 2026. An interview is broadcast across the Russia One network. The Speaker of the Russian Federation Council, Valentina Matvienko, is taking questions. A journalist brings up the American Special Forces raid in Caracas back in January 2026. The unprecedented kinetic operation targeting Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The journalist asks Matvienko a direct question. He asks if Moscow might adopt the same decapitation tactics and deploy special operators to capture or eliminate Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. I want you to listen to her exact translated response. Quote, "Are you implying that Russia should kidnap Ukrainian President Zelensky? That is not our style. We are a self-respecting country and respected by others. Russia would lose that respect if it used such methods." End quote. Let that sink in. We are currently operating in an era where a nation engaged in the most brutal mechanized ground war in modern European history is publicly lecturing Washington and Tel Aviv on statecraft. Even the old guard leadership in Moscow, the architects of a massive kinetic conflict, understand a fundamental law of global power dynamics. You do not assassinate or kidnap rival heads of state. You do not vaporize top-tier generals in sovereign capitals outside of a declared war. It is not about morality. It is about self-preservation. It is about maintaining the baseline architecture of international relations. When a superpower abandons diplomacy and relies entirely on extrajudicial killings, stealth strikes on sovereign soil, and snatch-and-grab raids against foreign leadership, they strip away their own institutional legitimacy. The United States and Israel are no longer acting as the guarantors of a rules-based global order. They are acting like cornered cartels. They are operating like a rogue syndicate that has exhausted all its strategic leverage, failed at conventional deterrence, and has nothing left but raw, localized violence. They have traded long-term geopolitical stability for the short-term dopamine hit of a tactical kill. And by completely erasing the boundaries of sovereign engagement, they have given every adversary on the planet permission to do exactly the same. That is the battlefield paradox. They think they are projecting strength on television. In reality, they are broadcasting profound desperation. Which brings us to the strategic vacuum driving this desperation. The actual reason they had to pull the trigger on Khademi. Why Khademi? Why now? The mainstream syndicates will tell you it was a preemptive strike against terror. The intelligence reality tells a completely different story. To understand the motive behind this assassination, you must understand the concept of the intelligence blind spot. You must look at the Persian Gulf, where the United States Navy and allied maritime forces are currently facing an unprecedented operational crisis. They are trapped inside an A2AD envelope. Anti-access, area denial. This is not a conventional war. Iran's coastal defense is not a centralized military base that a B-2 bomber can casually wipe off the map. It is a highly dispersed, deeply fortified macrostructure. It consists of thousands of decentralized, subterranean silos carved directly into the Zagros mountain ranges. It is an autonomous, interlocking grid of Qadir anti-ship cruise missiles and low-signature UAV swarms. Western intelligence cannot map this subterranean network. That is the blind spot. They do not know where the launch tubes are. They do not know how deep the blast doors go. And even if they possess the coordinates, the coalition does not have the ordnance volume required to neutralize thousands of hardened bunkers spread across a massive geographic coastline. So what is the result on the water? Total kinetic paralysis. We are witnessing multi-billion-dollar carrier strike groups, floating fortresses with daily operating costs in the millions, functionally pinned down by $20,000 disposable drones. The Aegis combat systems on American destroyers are highly advanced, but they possess a finite magazine depth. The coalition cannot establish maritime supremacy. They are bleeding munitions. They are firing $2 million interceptors to swat down $20,000 fiberglass drones. The economic mathematics of that exchange are fatal. The math is unsustainable. The math is quietly breaking the empire. When your multi-billion-dollar military apparatus fails to break a naval blockade, when your supply lines for interceptor missiles are stretched to the breaking point, you face a severe political crisis in Washington. The defense syndicates, the think tanks, and the Pentagon need a victory. They must project power to a domestic audience that is watching the global supply chain fracture. They cannot penetrate the A2AD umbrella. They cannot stop the Qadir missiles. So they look for a target they can hit, not a missile silo, not a subterranean drone factory, but a man. They ordered the decapitation strike on Major General Khademi not because he was the operational linchpin of the blockade. They killed him because he was visible, because his office in Tehran had a fixed surface-level coordinate, because dropping a bunker buster on a building in a capital city creates a high-yield kinetic event that plays perfectly on the evening broadcast. It is a fabricated illusion of control. It is a desperate public relations maneuver designed to cover up the absolute failure of the conventional battlefield. But here is the fatal miscalculation of the Western security apparatus. Assassinating an intelligence director does not stop a single cruise missile from leaving its silo. It does not magically alter the economic realities of maritime shipping. It does not reopen the Strait of Hormuz. All it does is permanently incinerate the backdoor diplomatic channels that were minutes away from doing exactly that. They traded a viable ceasefire for a temporary headline. And by doing so, they have forced the adversary into a corner where retaliation is no longer a political option. It is a systemic requirement. Which brings us to the next 48 hours. The vector of retaliation. We are now entering the blind spot. Western intelligence agencies are currently celebrating the elimination of a name on an organizational chart. But they are completely blind to the succession protocol that was activated the millisecond that bunker buster detonated. There is no power struggle in Tehran. There is no operational vacuum. A new director has already assumed command. He does not have a public profile. He is entirely invisible to the surveillance networks of the CIA and the Mossad, and he operates with a singular authorized mandate: absolute asymmetric retaliation. Do not expect a conventional military response. The IRGC does not fight symmetrically. Over the next 48 hours, the diplomatic window to reopen the Strait of Hormuz will officially, permanently close. The target matrix will shift from military assets to economic and covert vulnerabilities. We are no longer looking at localized maritime skirmishes. The retaliation vector will likely strike the structural arteries of the Western alliance. We are looking at the potential targeting of Allied oil extraction infrastructure across the Persian Gulf. The exact energy grid that dictates your domestic inflation rates, your supply chains, and the price of gasoline at your local pump. We are looking at the activation of sleeper cells, targeting isolated diplomatic facilities and intelligence outposts on a global scale. They traded a viable 45-day ceasefire for the assassination of one man. They chose the temporary spectacle of violence over the structural mechanics of peace. The defense syndicates and the political class will tell you this strike made the world safer. They will tell you the adversary is degrading. But as the maritime blockade solidifies, as the energy markets brace for the kinetic shockwave, and as the global grid prepares for the unseen retaliation, ask yourself one question: who is actually being bled to death?